Mesdames et messieurs, merci beaucoup. Pardon ma anglaise. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so very much, sincerely. I have tears in my eyes, and it's not just because of the wind. I'm really, really grateful that you all could make this journey, some from a long way. But those who live here in Glasgow too. I want to acknowledge you all as attendees, and I have to thank the town of Beekmantown, in particular Town Supervisor Norm Davis and Town Historian Gary Vancourt for their efforts in hosting this. I also want to thank our benefactors who made the memorial possible. One of them is here, Mr. Jeff Luck and Ms. Denise Luck. Where are you? Acknowledge. I am also a member of the Society of the Cincinnati, through which I represent my ancestor, my esteemed ancestor, what today is all about, Major Clement Gosselin. Clement Gosselin for you Anglophones. The Society of the Cincinnati was also a sponsor. It's not my money, but please express your appreciation to the Society of the Cincinnati, of which Clement was a member. Okay. Without further ado, our Master of Ceremonies, Monsieur Serge Pouillat.
Thank you very much, Mr. John Conrad Gosselin. You're fantastic. So, let's
saying that because I'm in a wheelchair.
let's start. So, Mr. Jonathan Carman, staff member of Congressman Elissa Stefanik, to Mr. Norm A. Davis, town supervisor of Beekmantown, Mr. Luc Desilets, member of Canadian Parliament for Rivière-des-Prairies riding, Mr. Jean-Pierre Turcotte, mayor of Sainte-Famille in the island of Orleans, where Clement Gosselin was born, to the members of the Society of the Cincinnati, the Daughters of the American Revolution, the Sons of the American Revolutions, and the members of Order of Lafayette, also to the members of the Gosselin Family Association and the Quebec France Francophonie Association, ladies and gentlemen. We are here today to recognize the particular contributions of Major Clement Gosselin in the years 1775 through 1783 to the Revolutionary War of Independence of the United States. Why we are here today is due to the initiative of Dr. Gérard Charpentier. Who is Dr. Charpentier? Okay. President of the Order of Lafayette, USA. Dr. Charpentier made the promotion of this idea from November 2013 up to now, and he should be thanked for shaking the tree so long so we could rip the apples now. We are here also because of the will of John Conrad Gosselin and family direct descendants of Major Clement Gosselin, living in the United States and a member of the Society of the Cincinnati. This gathering is also due to the will of the Gosselin family, still living in the island of Orleans near Quebec and in Canada, remembering the accomplishment of an illustrious member of their stock. Some of them are here today. Finally, this memorial is made possible by the commitment of the town supervisor of Beekmantown, Mr. Norm A. Davis, and associates, who provide time, space, energy, and financial resources for this event, as Mr. Jeff Locke also. So thank you to all of you. So I will invite to the podium the town supervisor of Beekmantown, Mr. Norm A. Davis. It's up to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Norm.
You gave me way too much credit for planning this. A lot of it goes to Gary. Here to welcome you all to Beekmantown. Any of you that are here from Canada, welcome you to Beekmantown, USA. Clement Gosselin and people that shared in his belief quite likely played a large role in the outcome of the Revolutionary War. Without their help, it might have come out different. We might not have the right to choose our leaders. We might not have the freedom to vote. So we thank those people for all of their efforts. I'm going to ask that you not let their efforts go in vain and exercise your right to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm.
Thank you very much. We will listen now to the speech of the Beekmantown historian, Mr. Gary Vancourt. Will you please? It's your turn.
Bienvenue. Welcome to Beekmantown. I will not even try to speak French. Last time I tried to do that, I got myself in trouble by saying the wrong word, and I learned a lesson.
Bienvenue was very good, though.
Might-
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try another word if it might be as good. Many might think that there are better places to meet than in a cemetery, but not today. This is a historic site, a site that shares stories of the families that contributed to the formation of the town of Beekmantown as we know it. In 2017, we were planning for the town's bicentennial. During that time, I was contacted by Jacques and John Gosselin about honoring a French Canadian who was born and lived in Quebec, but decided to join Washington's army during the American Revolution. The war that found the colonies seeking independence from the British Crown. The same British Crown that had defeated France about 10 years earlier and became the rulers of Quebec. That same Canadian became aware of and perhaps even met Benedict Arnold, who attacked Quebec City and a year later tried to stop the British advance on Lake Champlain at Valcour Island. That was October 11th, and that's coming up soon. If any of you are in the area, there's a big to-do about that every year. Anyway, we started to make plans to dedicate a memorial to that Canadian, to Major Clement Gosselin, whose misfortunes, or perhaps fortunes, brought him to Beekmantown. It was decided this ceremony would be a part of the Beekmantown bicentennial in 2020. Well, as the Beatles song goes, it's been a long and winding road. But here we are. The moment has come to have Major Clement Gosselin take his place along with the other memorialized at this historic site. Among those acknowledged for making this event happen today, I'd like to recognize the following. Sam Dyer, the former supervisor, who is the first one who gave his approval to doing this and his support. Norm Davis, the current supervisor, who continued with that support. The town board, because really it's the town board that says whether you're going to get the money or not, and the support or not. And that town board has changed since we started in 2017, but there's still been support, and it's greatly appreciated. I'd like to recognize Jim Gagno, who's standing in the back. Jim and Judy were both members of the Bicentennial Committee. And Jim said, I know Ray Dominy. I'll talk to Ray and see if we can have it done in the East Beekmantown Cemetery. Well, any of the people locally who know Ray Dominy know that he sometimes can be very persistent in his way. And he said, no, can't do it. It's a private cemetery. He's the caretaker. It was up to him. Well, time went by as COVID did its thing and put all of us on hold. And then later on, the more that we talked and the more that we started to understand what this memorial would be, Jim went back to Ray Dominy, explained that to him, and he said, sure, you can do that. If it wasn't for Jim, we wouldn't be here. We might be someplace else in Beekmantown, but we wouldn't be here. And if it wasn't for Ray for agreeing to that, we would not be here. And Ray is not able to be here today. But his son, Scott Dominy, also continued that support. And so without these folks from the Beekmantown side, we are able to have this ceremony here in East Beekmantown. Once again, welcome to Beekmantown. Enjoy learning about the part of the Clement Gosselin story. And as they say en français, c'est tout. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Gary.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you. We will listen now to the staff member of Congressional of Congresswoman Stefanik, Mr. Jonathan Carmen.
Thank you. My name is Jonathan Carmen. I am the District Director for Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. The Congresswoman could not be here today, but she wanted to make sure to mark this remarkable occasion with a letter. Dear friends, thank you for inviting me to participate in the dedication of the monument commemorating Major Clement Gosselin. I regret that I am unable to be there today in person. Gosselin served as a member of the 2nd Canadian Regiment, known as Congress's Own, during the American invasion of Quebec. Following the failure of that invasion, he was captured and imprisoned in Quebec for aiding the American cause. Upon being released, Gosselin, along with his brother and father-in-law, rejoined the Americans at White Plains, New York. Serving under General George Washington and the Marquis de Lafayette throughout the war, he was wounded during the Siege of Yorktown in 1781. Following the war, Gosselin received 1,000 acres of land in Clinton County for his service to the American cause. In 1788, he was appointed Major of the New York Militia for Clinton County. Major Gosselin passed away on March 9, 1816 in Beekmantown and lies buried there today. Today, his descendants and local officials commemorate Major Clement Gosselin for his contribution to the cause of American liberty. Thank you to John Gosselin, the town of Beekmantown, and to all of those in attendance to mark this occasion. If my office can ever be of assistance, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Elise M. Stefanik, Member of Congress.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you.
Dr. Gérard Charpentier, PhD, is the sole one who started all this Major Clement Gosselin affair in Quebec in November 2013. We all be focused on your speech, Dr. Charpentier. It's your turn.
Distinguished representative of New York State and the province of Quebec, presidents of organizations, members of the Gosselin family, members of the Order of Lafayette Order, ladies and gentlemen. With the unveiling today in Beckmantown of this new play, dedicated to Clement Gosselin, it is for me a new stage in an adventure that began 10 years ago. I first visited this region of Beckmantown and this cemetery in 2012, and I made first contact with the city. Then in 2013, in Quebec, more precisely on November 9, I met Serge Pouliot for the first time, and I told him about my research relating to Clement Gosselin and the project that the Lafayette Order had in mind, to create a memorial site in Sainte-Famille to honor Clement Gosselin and his comrades in arms during the American Revolution. After this first meeting, 4 activities were initiated and sponsored by the Order of Lafayette Canada in Quebec and organized by Serge Pouliot. He made a very good job. Thank you, Serge. The most important was on July 21st, 2018, with the official unveiling of the Clement Gosselin plaque in the Park of the Ancestors near the Church of Sainte-Famille. That said, one might still wonder what the Order of Lafayette has in common with a native of Sainte-Famille at the time under the French regime of New France, so French citizen, and birth here in Beckmantown, New York. In short, the Order of Lafayette Order is a French associative order with independent branches, one in the United States and one in Canada. It is a non-political, non-religious, and non-union organization dedicated to not only to promoting the memory of the engagement of the Marquis de Lafayette, the hero of two worlds during both the American and French revolutions, but also to maintaining in present time a collective memory of these historical moments, which are the basis of our modern societies. In fact, Clement Gosselin, who was fighting in the Continental Army as part of the 2nd Regiment with the rank of captain, would have crossed paths twice with Lafayette, while he was serving as Major General in the Continental Army under the order of George Washington. Two probable meetings, which remain to be confirmed, would have taken place. For the first time in February 1778 in the region of Albany, it's not very far from, as part of the project to reconquer Canada, the French colony. Major General Lafayette had come at the request of George Washington to assess the combat capabilities of the Asian regiment. What he then discovered was not an army of 2,500 men as promised, but about 900 men living in very precarious conditions, and above all without any equipment or supervision, and no formal military training. The project was therefore abandoned. And again, for the second time, in October 1781, in Yorktown, Virginia, at the end of the Revolutionary War during the siege of Yorktown, where the now well-structured 2nd Canadian Regiment was placed under the command of Major General Lafayette. The regiment that Clement Gosselin was still part of was assigned to work in the trenches. He was injured on October 13 by splinters of wood projected during a bombardment, 6 days before the victorious final battle. This is why today, more than 2.5 centuries later, I am, as president of both the Order Lafayette Order USA and Order Lafayette Canada, proud to be able to honor, jointly with the town of Beckmantown and Sainte-Famille, the memory of Clement Gosselin and all his comrades in arms. Thank you very much.
Merci, Dr. Charpentier.
a member of the Canadian Parliament in charge of the veteran affairs for his party, the Bloc Québécois, has studied the Major Gosselin file. Please let us welcome Mr. Luc Desilets, member of the Canadian Parliament for the Rivière des Prairies riding. He will speak both in French as in English. So, M. Desilets, c'est à vous.
Merci. Du côté droit, je vais parler en français, et du côté gauche, mon adjoint répliquera en anglais. Malheureusement, il va y avoir une petite connotation nationaliste là-dedans. Oui, je suis député du Bloc québécois. Je suis un fervent indépendantiste et je le suis de père en fils et de grand-père en père en fils. Et je trouve tellement beau de voir quelqu'un, un vrai descendant des Gosselin. Je suis impressionné. Nous, Québécois, sommes fiers d'être un peuple de souche française dont la langue nationale et la langue commune n'est que le français. Toutefois, encore une fois, par souci de bien me faire comprendre de tous, mon adjoint Christophe Bergeron traduira mes propos. Son anglais est de beaucoup meilleur au mien.
We, the people of Quebec, are proud of our French roots. We are proud to speak French. That being said, I would like to be understood by all of you, so I will translate this address in English instead of Mr. Desilets.
Alors, bonjour plus officiellement à tous. Merci infiniment aux organisateurs d'avoir pensé à moi, d'avoir pensé à nous. Ça aurait dû peut-être être ma collègue que vous connaissez de sa circonscription précise, je ne sais pas, l'île d'Orléans et compagnie, Charlevoix précisément, parfait, Charlevoix qui aurait dû être là, elle ne pouvait pas. C'est en tant que représentant, vice-président du comité des anciens combattants, comité permanent des anciens combattants, que je suis là. Alors merci beaucoup, merci aux orateurs présents, merci aux élus et merci surtout aux historiens, car sans eux, on n'aurait pas le pedigree actuel de M. Gosselin, on n'aurait pas cette cérémonie-là, c'est clair, puis on ne serait pas capable de l'ancrer adéquatement dans notre histoire.
Hello to everyone. It is an honor for me to be here representing the Bloc Québécois. I want to thank the organizers for this ceremony, the public, the descendants of the Gosselin family, and the other guest speakers, historians and elected officials.
Alors, remarquez qu'on a un soleil splendide pour nous aider à commémorer cet événement. Vous savez, lors des récentes cérémonies entourant les funérailles de la reine d'Angleterre, il y a un député canadien qui a insinué dans un discours que les Québécois avaient eu l'occasion de participer à la Révolution américaine, mais y avaient renoncé. Préférant rester une colonie. Clairement, ce député-là ne connaissait pas notre histoire, ne connaissait pas les Québécois, ne connaissait pas l'histoire du Québec. Nous-mêmes, Québécois, ne la connaissons pas suffisamment, je trouve, fréquemment. Et Clement Gosselin apparaît dans le décor. Clement Gosselin, un combattant du régiment Hazen, apparaît ces temps-ci après un discours comme celui du député canadien. Et ça nous permet de remettre en contexte, de refaire peut-être un petit bout d'histoire. Un bout d'histoire, mais un bout d'une incroyable histoire qu'est celle du major Clement Gosselin.
During the recent ceremonies around the funeral of the Queen of England, a Canadian member of Parliament insinuated during a speech that Quebecers were offered to participate in the American Revolution, but instead chose not to, chose to remain a colony. This person clearly did not know the fascinating story of Major Clement Gosselin and the fighters of the Hazen Regiment.
Moi-même, je dois vous avouer que quelque temps, je ne connaissais pas l'histoire de Clement Gosselin. On a acheté le livre, on s'est éduqué, mon adjoint parlementaire et moi, et on a découvert des choses fantastiques, un pan encore une fois, un pan de notre histoire. J'ignorais même, et je n'ai pas de honte à le dire, j'ignorais même que des Canadiens français avaient participé à la guerre d'indépendance américaine. Que Clément Gosselin avait vécu la conquête et ses horreurs, les champs, les maisons pillées, brûlées, les arrestations arbitraires et la honte d'avoir été conquis. Comme beaucoup, Clément Gosselin, je pense, et j'en ai la conviction, était nostalgique de cette nouvelle France et amer, évidemment, amer envers les nouveaux maîtres. On dit souvent l'ennemi de mon ennemi est mon ami. C'est peut-être vrai. Christophe.
1 month ago, I am ashamed to say that I did not even know who Clement Gosselin was. I did not know that quite a few French Canadians, like Clement Gosselin, had participated actively in the American Revolutionary War. Clement Gosselin had lived through the conquest of New France and its horrors, the fields and houses pillaged and burned, the arbitrary arrests, the shame of being conquered. Like many, he was nostalgic of New France and bitter towards its new masters. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, is it not what they say?
On achève, ne vous inquiétez pas. Si on vient du siège de la ville de Québec, on est en 1775, jusqu'à la célèbre victoire à Yorktown en 1781. On peut dire que Clément Gosselin, cet homme, c'est pas un homme, c'est un surhomme, je pense, là. Cet homme a eu une vie des plus trépidantes. Ses missions d'espionnage réalisées pour le compte du général George Washington, entre 1778 et 1780, sont les plus remarquables. Il est extraordinaire qu'un Canadien français, aujourd'hui on dirait québécois, je n'ai pas besoin de vous le dire, qu'un Canadien français, somme toute, assez ordinaire comme base, comme humain, comme Canadien français, comme Québécois, a eu un lien avec une figure aussi historique, aussi importante que celle du premier président des États-Unis. Ça me fascine, ça m'impressionne. J'en suis bouche bée.
From the siege of Quebec City in 1775 to the famous victory at Yorktown, Virginia, the least we can say is that Clement Gosselin had an impressive life. His spying missions conducted for General George Washington between 1778 and 1780 are particularly remarkable. We find it particularly remarkable that an extraordinary, a not extraordinary person like Clement Gosselin, or frankly quite an ordinary man, would share a relationship with such an imposing figure as the first president of the United States, George Washington.
Clément Gosselin, en participant à la guerre d'indépendance, a posé un geste de conviction. J'ai choisi le mot conviction parce que je pense que ça reflète la totalité du geste en question. Un geste de conviction parce qu'il risquait beaucoup, il risquait tout et il a pratiquement tout perdu d'ailleurs. Il a laissé sa famille derrière lui, il a perdu ses biens. Encore plus dramatique, il a été excommunié. Il faut se reporter à cette époque-là. Être excommunié, ça voulait dire être mis plus que dans le garde-robe, c'est être mis dans le 4e cabanon en arrière, puis il faut éviter les gens qui sont excommuniés. Il fallait éviter les gens qu'il a excommuniés. Clément Genre a multiplié aussi les séjours en prison qui n'était pas ressemblée à celle que l'on connaît aujourd'hui. Clément Gosselin est devenu un indésirable. Et d'indésirable aujourd'hui, on en fait quelqu'un qui mérite tout ce qu'il a comme présence, avec votre présence ici, et comme cérémonie, et comme mémorial. Christophe.
his participation to the Revolutionary War to oust the British was an act of conviction. An act of conviction because he was risking so much, leaving his family behind, losing his property, multiplying prison stays. Apparently, he might even have been excommunicated, which was the gravest of things at the time. He was forsaken in his own land.
C'était un homme de conviction dont la raison d'être était d'expulser les Anglais du Canada. Pour y arriver, il s'est mis au service du Congrès. En effectuant cela, il savait très bien, il savait pertinemment qu'en supportant la cause des Américains, cela en viendrait très probablement qu'à aider la cause qui l'intéressait profondément, celle des Canadiens français.
Clement Gosselin was a man of conviction. His entire being was aimed at ousting the British from Canada. To achieve that goal, he swore himself to the Congress, which was doing exactly that on the south side of the border.
Merci à tous ceux qui gardent ce travail de mémoire, qui travaillent à ce que ce travail de mémoire s'effectue de jour en jour. C'est un boulot extraordinaire à mes yeux. C'est un bout essentiel pour qu'on puisse préserver patrimoine, histoire, et surtout l'asseoir de façon correcte dans le temps. L'inauguration récente d'une plaque en l'honneur de M. Gosselin en Sainte-Famille sur l'île d'Orléans où il est né était une étape. Aujourd'hui, le dévoilement de cette autre plaque en est un autre tout aussi important. Je suis certain, moi, que les Québécois et les Américains ont beaucoup à gagner à découvrir ce fascinant personnage. Ce personnage exemplaire, ce personnage qui devrait tous nous servir d'exemple. Ce personnage qui a fait office de trait d'union entre nos deux peuples à un moment charnière aussi de nos deux histoires. Un lointain écho des valeurs qui animent toujours nos deux sociétés différentes, mais nos deux sociétés démocratiques que sont le Québec et les États-Unis. Des valeurs de justice, des valeurs de liberté, et j'insisterai sur des valeurs d'autodétermination.
Thanks to everyone who is rehabilitating the memory of this great man. The recent inauguration of a plaque in Sainte-Famille, Île d'Orléans, where he was born, was one step. Today's inauguration is another step. I am convinced that both Quebecers and Americans will benefit from knowing more about this fascinating character. He who formed the bridge between our two people at a decisive moment in our histories, a far echo of the values that still shape, to this day, our two democratic societies, Quebec and the United States, the values of justice, freedom, and self-determination.
Merci beaucoup pour cette invitation. J'étais touché, je suis encore plus touché d'être là, de voir à quoi ça peut ressembler, de voir tous ces gens sensibles à cette cause. Et je suis impressionné de voir un autre Gosselin, vraiment impressionné, et là-dessus que l'on puisse faire perdurer la mémoire de M. Clement Gosselin. Notre histoire, notre passé, c'est pas n'importe quoi. C'est ce qui va nous amener à demain et à après-demain. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, M. Gosselin. Merci, M. Gosselin. Thank you. Christophe, merci beaucoup.
Okay. Now the last speaker. As an author, Jean-Claude Bélanger-Cyr interests lie on the history of French-Canadian throughout North America. He originates from Beauport, near Quebec City, the first seigneurial concession dedicated to colonization, where his family is present since 1652. The question for Mr. Bélanger-Cyr today will be, Why commission two memorial plates remembering the accomplishments of Major Clement Gosselin? First in Sainte-Famille and second one in Big Man Town. And what it means for both countries. Mr. Bélanger-Cyr, will you please? It's your turn.
Bonjour. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll have a few minutes of your time. But first, I want to say a little fact from my family. During invasion of Quebec by Continental Army in 1775-76, Colonel James Livingston was stationed in Beauport, and in my family paper, I have still an unpaid bill from Continental Army signed by Colonel Livingston, dated February 1776. You now know, you now know where I am coming from, but I am not collecting today. Today we pay tribute to Major Clement Gosselin, who demonstrated during at least 7 years of war, in fact 9, zeal to contract to recruit more than 100 Canadian militia for 2nd Congress own regiment or corps. They called them the Infernal, with whom he fought. He's been imprisoned, then forced to hide with First Nation in Médotech, Acadia. His family was ostracized for his action in Quebec. He conducted at least 3 risky spying missions in Quebec, reporting them directly to George Washington. He directed his soldiers to combat and participate in the final Battle of Yorktown, where he was wounded to a leg. Major Clement Gosselin has attained the highest rank for a Canadian born in the region of Quebec City. Congress appointed him at this level for service rendered in the Continental Army in times of war. After the war, he acted as a leader helping Canadian militia of 2nd Corps obtain lands in New York State around Big Man Town. My speech in 4 parts is focused on the realities of French Canadians at the time of the Revolutionary War and explain why the population in Quebec act as they did toward Congress. Major Clement Gosselin is somewhat a recognized hero in the United States. In Canada and in Quebec, that understanding lags a bit, or rather, the story of Gosselin and the Canadian militia supporting Congress is not fully understood and appreciated for what it has contributed to achieve on both sides of the borders. This text will be a part of a memoir to the Ministry of Culture in Quebec this fall to recognize Major Clement Gosselin as a person of historic importance. Clement Gosselin brings to life part of our history in Quebec, where we come from as a people and by which steps Canada was being built upon. First, let me remind you the situation in both countries prior to Revolutionary War. 13 states forming Congress as well as the province of Quebec conquered during the French and Indian War had mixed feelings about Great Britain. The rules of mother country and its governance style were causing much concerns and turmoil amongst our population. It's going to be long, eh? 13 states and Quebec share the common feelings of oppression on their sense of what justice and liberty is or what it should be. The reason behind their sentiment, though, were sometimes similar and sometimes opposite. 13 states had lived with colonial assemblies, and Congress had representatives from each state to define their common interests and future. Quebec had no colonial assembly and none under the French regime. A governor ruled a council made up of English citizens forming less than 4% of the population. The Proclamation of 1763, issued by the Parliament in London after conquest, was to transform the Canadian population into full English stock. Governance in Quebec was established as if the French-Canadian population were not there. Our seigneurial and religious elites were trying to catch up a place among the new regime of 12 years of existence and became loyal to the British by the Quebec Act. There was a split in the country. Besides, in this period, the population around Quebec City was still recovering from the last war of conquest, in particular General Wolfe's decision to punish heavily the civil population for resisting earlier on the attack in Beauport in 1759. So Wolfe did ask to burn to the ground thousands of farms and most villages below Quebec City on both sides of the St. Lawrence River and Ile d'Orléans, where Clement Gosselin lived. Canadians remember what the English ordered then. Families in Quebec region had lost many lives and suffered many hardships following this heavy burning or through the deportation of 16,000 Acadians where they had siblings. Building new farms and villages took a generation after. So resentment was everywhere against the British. But then these families had Canadian voyageurs traveling up to the Ohio Valley and became aware early on of the dissatisfaction south of the border. Also, Congress sends 3 types of letters to the Canadians. First, inviting them to join forces and form the 14 states with the same advantages as the other colonies. Second, to rebel against oppression. And a third, to remain neutral, not to be treated as enemy. The Canadian population had a favorable understanding for the cause of Congress. Now, my second part. Let's see the leadership of Congress and George Washington during the war. To recognize Clement Gosselin for the cause of justice and liberty in Big Man Town, we must go back to the practical experience and tactical strength of George Washington. Washington entered our history book in Canada as a villain who slain officer Jumonville in 1754, a peace emissary advising to quit Ohio area, which were considered then New France territory, when Haudenosaunee Iroquois with Washington gave the fatal blow. Washington had built Fort Necessity after Jumonville's death to protect against attack and ambush expected from the Canadian and First Nation militia. 2 months after, a French force attacked Washington, who surrendered the fort and negotiated his return home. In 1755, General Braddock had a war party to attack New France. There, Washington met again with First Nation and Canadian militia at an ambush fatal to Braddock's army. Washington, at 23, had faced and escaped death and horrors with firearms and diplomacy. He could value different types of war forces, importance of terrain knowledge, value of spying the enemy, and saw courage of men in times of war. Through his earned judgment, we can appreciate the value and mastery of his conducts in years ahead. Washington developed through its earlier confrontation with our ancestor a most necessary knowledge to secure, neutralize, and interest a most dangerous neighbor in the north and west in the Ohio Valley, not to interfere and rather help Congress to become independent of Great Britain. Do not awake a sleepy dog. With this diplomacy, even though Congress opposed many aspects of the Quebec Act, Congress secured a majority of Canadians to remain neutrals and not to interfere in war. With the invasion of Quebec in 1775, Washington and Congress secured a time period to organize support for the rebellion, recruit soldiers, train them, organize supply. After a retreat from Quebec in 1776, a number of Canadians decided to help further the rebels and participate fully to the war in the neighboring country from 1776 to 83. Washington was favorable to other invasion of Quebec with Lafayette to eliminate a stronghold for the British, but the goal was first to free the 13th state from the British. The possibility of invading Quebec was a tactic helpful to divide British force, an argument to maintain neutrality of Canadians who hoped the British out, and to boost loyalty on Canadians like Gosselin fighting our common cause with Washington. Washington selected Gosselin to work directly for him and act as a spy in Quebec. He sends him 3 years in a row to investigate the British forces and interests of Canadians toward Congress. Real information allows Washington to make better strategy. Gosselin fulfilling these missions is proof of his great value to Washington. On the other side, another aspect is Congress members were collectively a wise and smart bunch. The new assembly of 13 independent states had their own interests. They compete for lands, but they found compromise between themselves. Congress was smart enough to overcome the thinking of both Great Britain and France and their governance apparatus during the Revolutionary War. Congress did not want an army from France staying in North America. On the other hand, France's prime objectives were securing Congress commerce with them and keeping fishing rights, and they renounced having a colony in North America. Congress demonstrated by their words and consecutive action a sustained energy, a determination, and will to fight for justice and liberty. They became, for those who can see, leaders worth following and support. That is what Major Clement Gosselin did. Third, Canadian action during the Revolutionary War. Canadian population act as a prudent, neutral majority, but benevolent for Congress, as their last letter asked them for. But an active minority was definitely pro-Congress. Carleton, governor of Quebec, inquired about Canadian attitudes after the rebel went away. It says, unto the majority of the population there appears a benevolent, neutral attitude which took the forms of participating to various chores, provides lodging, foods, woods for the fire, doing spy works, recruiting volunteers, transport, propaganda for the rebel cause. Very few will take arms for the cause of rebels, but very few will also take arms for the crown. The Journal of Sanguinet says, the neutral majority and the active minority both went along in opposite direction from seigneurial and religious elite that were asking loyalty to crown. Seigneurial and religious elites believe in the recent opening of the Quebec Act. But the population had suffered heavily in the previous decennia and were not taken care since the conquest. Now that they have a little say in Congress war, individual citizens took the matter in their own hands. It's time for England to suffer as well. Major Clement Gosselin, two other French-Canadian Major Olivier and Liebert, and more than 500 Canadian militia out of a population of only 75,000 took action to join the Continental Army early on and risk their lives in times of war. It's over. Few minutes and I'll be okay. Thank you. Thank you. The neutral majority of Canadians were helping quite a bit Congress. Their arrays of voyageurs in the fur trade had strong links with First Nation on the western side of the 13 states, from Great Lakes to Ohio Valley. Siding with the British, imagine the blood spill. So Washington saved that. He knew. The Canadian militia in '75 was the first military force outside the 13 states to support Congress war against Great Britain for justice and liberty. And they did this before France that reached this level in 1778. U.S. historian Robert Ketchum sees Canadian militia in support of Congress as an elite corps going silently in the wood. They are good shooters, they can ambush enemy, and they can live in the forest during months in all kinds of weather. Canadian forms part of two regiments for Congress, the first Congress-owned regiment under Colonel James Livingstone, and the second under Colonel Moses Hazen. Now I have a series of things that they did, so I'm going to simply read you these actions. Livingstone with the 1st Corps participated in the taking of Fort Chambly in October '75. They took also Fort St. John in November '75, where they captured a significant portion of the seigneurial elite that were then loyal to the British. The 1st Corps was the first to attack Quebec City rampart in 1775. Livingstone, the First Corps, with Benedict Arnold, provoked the retreat of 1,500 British forces de Saint-Léger that were having a siege of Fort Stanwix, pushing for weeks Burgoyne's reinforcement in Saratoga. Livingstone, the with First Congress, participated in the two battles of Saratoga in 1777 against Burgoyne at Freeman's Farm and Bemis Heights. Livingstone was one of the force under Ebenezer Learn with Benedict Arnold, who invigorated troops that broke the enemy lines and won the battle at Bemis Heights. This battle is the turning point of the war. After Burgoyne's defeat, France believed then that the Congress was serious and could win their revolution. France signed a treaty with Congress to help their supply to win the war and supported openly Congress against Great Britain. Spying mission for Clement Gosselin and others like Pierre Caillin started in 1778-80. Livingstone with the First Corps was also instrumental in finding the treason of the Benedict Arnold to the British side before it was too late. West Point was then saved for Congress. Then in 81, First Corps combined with Second Corps with Moose Hazen, and they were active on many battles, making use of infernal guerrilla tactics to protect Continental troops when a retreating order was given. The Second Corps, Moose Hazen, was active at Yorktown where Clement Gosselin was wounded. The facts remain that 500 Canadians supported actively Congress and Continental Army. The French-Canadian contributions were real up to the end of the war. Fourth, the result for the Revolutionary War in the US, Congress became liberated of Great Britain by the Paris Treaty in 1783. A Republican form of government took place with elected officials, taxation with representation. Second, Congress gained the land south of the Great Lakes and the east of Mississippi River. Third, the creation of the United States allows liberty to export their products to all countries and not only to Great Britain. The federal government was then established above state level, and the Loyalists had to quit the 13 colonies. Clement Gosselin and members of the Second Corps don't want to live under British rule, and they receive land grants from George Washington in the New York State around Big Man Town. The result for the province of Quebec. Clement Gosselin and Canadians from the Second Corps did not succeed in liberating Quebec, but Great Britain had lost much of its colonies in North America. Freedom of United States, partly done with support of 500 Canadians to Congress and by the fact the Canadian remains neutral and didn't help the British, was the gift of our ancestor to Great Britain in retaliation against cruelty done to our civil population in burning of villages during the conquest and for destruction of Acadian population in the Great Upheaval. Great Britain risking losing all colonies in North America if it didn't develop a positive attitude with Canadians of Quebec, its most important colony then, this side of the ocean. Quebec territory was reduced and the land south of the Great Lakes and Mississippi River became the United States. But promises of the Quebec Act on religion, seigneurial system, French laws are maintained instead of being thrown away as many worried at the time. And then the Parliament in London became enlightened and motivated to support a distinct Quebec and protect its territories. To conclude, having a plate in Big Man Town remembering Major Clement Gosselin, the highest level attained by a Canadian from Quebec region in the Continental Army, is a tribute to his accomplishment and those of 500 anonymous Canadians who supported Congress then. Major Clement Gosselin and other Canadian militia fought for an ideal of justice and liberty, lacking cruelly at these times in their country. Their sacrifices constitute one of our ancestors' response to their situation at the time. Their action did revenge our past, supported the just cause, while inspiring more respect from British for our future. United States is today the leader of the free world and our most important business partner. As our ancestors were instrumental in its early success, we don't want the United States to be a leader for just a century, but for many more centuries to come. To end this speech, as a thought from the French thinker Montesquieu on friendship, The heart is citizen of all the countries of the world. Thank you.
Now you hear everything. Merci.
Do you want to shoot for the trumpet? You are well, sir. It's time for the trumpet?
Yes.
Now it's time for the trumpet. Il Silencio, played by Mr. Matt Van Wagner. Mr. Van Wagner. Will you please? Unveil the flag?
Yes. Could you take this one? Is there something behind me? Okay.
Well, you're going to have to take most of this one.
Why don't you just do it sitting?
Yeah, it should be well.
Open them up and be photographed.
Let's you do this. Let's put it in this one.
Just to come up with you.
No, put it right beside you here.
I can't see.
You want to put it right beside you?
No, right there.
Front?
Yes, very nice.
Hold it.
No, the camera picture.
Oh, I'm going to get this over and it's over the blue.
Oui. Va donc le chercher. Oui.
Merci.
After the pictures, Dr. Charpentier will give some certificates to certain members. But at first, I will ask to Mr. Norm A. Davis for the gift to Mayor Turcotte.
That'll be at the town hall.
That will be at the town hall, okay. So, Dr. Charpentier, it's time for you to give the certificates to Mr. Marc Junot Balderin Filali Baba, and Mr. Lefebvre, Mr. Turcotte, and myself. Will you please? No, mate. Monsieur Desilets. Monsieur Desilets, ensuite. Monsieur Davis. Where are you, Mr. Davis? You have a certificate for you coming from Order of Lafayette, USA. Mr. Juneau. Oh, thank you very much. Oh, thank you very much. It's perfect. Thank you. So, to conclude, wait, it's time for pictures. And will you come here in that sense? We will get it. We will send it to you. We will send them to you. Okay? Mr. Lefebvre.
Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very proud to be here today. And while thinking at the moment in 2017, when I brought my corporation and that of my organization, l'Association Québec-France-Québec, to, I would say, the inspired initiative of Serge Pouliot, aiming the rehabilitation in Canada of Major Clement Gosselin and the reminding of the numerous achievements of this soldier and probably first intelligence agent throughout history, mainly in the last years of the 18th century. At the end of this dedication ceremony, I would like to sincerely thank all of you who came here today, from Quebec and from many parts of the United States. Je voudrais remercier particulièrement nos trois historiens, Messieurs Gary Vancourt, Gaston Deschênes et Jean-Claude Bélanger-Cyr, qui ont travaillé très fort de nombreuses heures et même de nombreux jours et qui nous ont ainsi permis de nous souvenir de la précieuse contribution historique du Major Clement Gosselin à des événements historiques qui ont créé une nouvelle nation. I do thank the authorities of Beekman Town and the state of New York for their promptness to collaborate in building the monument and preparing this remembrance and dedication ceremony. Many thanks to Look Brothers Incorporated for the building of the monument. I do also thank all our distinguished speakers who have shared with us today their knowledge, their great knowledge of that very important period of our common history. At last, I express a wish. It is desirable that we will gather again in the state of Virginia, in Yorktown, for a similar ceremony of dedication and remembrance in the future years. Be careful going back home.
So thank you everyone for your participation. So we will go to the Big Mountain Town Hall, I think. Mr. Do you
Everybody is invited to the town hall. Mr. Vancor has set up a very nice reception at the town hall. It's upstairs. Please join us up there and be out of the wind. Thank you. Also, I want to thank the West Shazy Fire Department for coming down, doing traffic control for us. The Beatmantown Fire Department is having their calendar drive today. Otherwise, they would have taken care of it. We really appreciate this is what communities are all about. Thank you.
Thank you very much.